Welcome back. Yay! Today I am reading chapter 7 of Shelly, my book. I will spoil this chapter if I preface it, so I'm going to dive into it. But as promised, I have delivered a second video this week. Wow, she did it. And after filming, editing, and posting 2 videos in 1 week, I've decided, why not just keep doing that for the rest of the chapters? Because personally, I want to finish this book. I want to read through it. I want to get to the ending with y'all, and I don't know if I can wait for 1 chapter a week anymore. So we're going to 2 chapters a week, and I hope that makes it exciting for some of you. It makes it exciting to me. On top of that, I definitely miss sharing blog posts with y'all and talking about the deeper things in life too. Not that this book doesn't mention deep things in life, but my posts where I read my blogs are a lot more interactive, and I want to get back to that too. So we're speeding up the journey a little, but keeping it just as enjoyable, if not more so, because there's not as much wait time. And yeah, if you haven't subscribed yet, definitely subscribe. You can turn on the alert button if you want to know when a new chapter is posted, since I don't really have a specific day in the week I'm posting them. And like the video if you end up liking the video, and we'll go from there. Yay, time to read. Oh, actually, one final note. I'm still working on my character voices. When I did my last video, I noticed that they all sounded very similar. In my head, they were kind of obnoxious, and so I was trying to not lean into that. But then it just ended up not sounding different enough. So I'm just gonna go full on into it, and if it's not your vibe, I'm sorry. You might just have to read or wait until I can afford to have someone do an audiobook for me. But this is what we're working with. If I was reading Twilight, I promise you the voices would be so much better. I have a lot more practice with that set of characters, but here we are, and now for reals, let's get to the book. Chapter 7, Empty. In her hands, Shelly stared at the culprit. She lifted it out of the fridge and analyzed the words on the improperly wrapped, harmful little slices. The more her gaze bore into it, the more she could not escape the blame. What she grasped in her hands was not the criminal. It was only an object. She was the criminal. Shelly had given John food poisoning. Shelly, John moaned, requesting her attention. She prepared herself to deliver the unsettling discovery. Better to face the disappointment rather than dwell on it. Upon learning her revelation, she thought John would never eat lunch cooked by her again, but she believed he deserved the truth. Closing the fridge, she passed through the entryway and into the living room. John blended into the mush of the brown couch, sunken with fatigue. He looked like the remains of a melted marshmallow. The ham. Shelly waved the packaged meat in the air. What? I put ham in your grilled cheese earlier today. Ham that I got at a discounted price. Ham that was in clearance. So that's why it costs less. Shrugging, John moved his attention to his nail beds. No jaw dropped or eyebrows raised. None of him signaled surprise. Instead, his actions signaled, I'm far more neutral and natural than normal. The observations collected in Shelly's head, and she came to the most likely conclusion. Oh my gosh. John's head popped up. What? You knew. You already figured it out, didn't you? You knew I gave you food poisoning. Slapping her forehead, Shelly walked toward John. Now she felt guilty and stupid. The perfect combination for self-hate. That's why you were acting weird after you threw up. Ugh, it was so obvious. Too full? Shifting her weight back and forth, Shelly rebuked herself for being stupid enough not to notice John's tells until after they got home. Even worse, she had bought meat that clearly had gone bad. It should have been obvious how it was tossed in with a bunch of other store products, cookies with smudged frosting decor, seafood, imploded cake. You were just trying to save money, John said. It doesn't save us money if you end up having to go to the hospital. As she shifted her weight again, Shelly's hand came close enough for John to grab. I won't have to go to the hospital. It's not a huge deal, he said. John, I think your gut already decided how big a deal this was. Letting go of John's hand, Shelly disappeared into the kitchen, popped open their trash can, and sent the forbidden food swishing into the garbage bag. No more clearance meat. Shelly! She returned in a convicted state, shoulders slumped and hand blocking most of her vision. What? I had something that I wanted to say earlier. You know, when I called you into the room? If it were quick, she could bear any negative comment he might make about the situation. If he needed help, She could dig deep for conviction to provide for him. "Go ahead," she said. Deep breaths. "I love you," he said. Undeserved love. It came too easily. He gave too willingly. Even after she had poisoned him, he loved her. "You should check the judgment part of your brain. I think it's broken." Shelly dropped her hand and leaned against the wall. "And what part of the brain is that?" John said. "Shouldn't you know? You're the one who likes science." "It's more like a hobby. All I have time for is studying rose systems, not people." Shelly diverted to her phone and let it speak the answer. The frontal lobe. Tapping his forehead, John raised his pupils upward, as if he could see his actual brain. "Looks all good to me." Half of Shelly disappeared behind the kitchen wall again, and she sorted through the fridge items. First, she checked for any other potential food hazards. Then she grabbed a bottle of Gatorade. Amber and Lucas had dropped it off for John. When Shelly returned to the living room, she sat down next to John on their bumpy couch. "Here," she said, handing him the bottle. "Amber said it will help you replace your electrolytes." The mention of their friend had brought silence, but John accepted the drink and unscrewed the cap. "So, Amber and Lucas," John said. "Yeah," Shelly said. After nearly 2 years of marriage, the two could tell they felt similarly about the subject. No one spoke. Thoughts and feelings surrounded Shelly, but she avoided them. A few minutes went by where she chose to neither think nor feel and did nothing but sit, her fingertips grazing the worn cotton under her. She scrunched her nose, then cried. The tears did not burst out like a fountain. Instead, the tears were those last drops of water dripping out of the faucet. One landed on John's face, and he twisted to his side, unsurprised by this reaction. With a pat on Shelly's side, John kissed her wet cheek. A deeper feeling than sorrow filled his gaze, expressing a story of remorse and yearning. "I'm sorry," he said. Shelly whimpered, and John rubbed his hand back and forth against her leg. Forming fists, she rubbed her cheeks and eyelids. "I should be happy for them, right? They're having a baby," she moaned. John wrapped Shelly into his chest. It's so soon, and they weren't even trying. They probably don't have any baby stuff." "Most people don't have baby stuff when they first get pregnant." "We would," Shelly said. The tears stopped and the air stiffened. No more thoughts came to Shelly. This fact had silenced them. For a second, she had a break from heartbreak. Then John spoke. "Shelly," and she remembered all her confusion, all her sorrow. "How am I supposed to handle this? Why couldn't it be us? How am I going to watch them grow, their little family?" There were no answers to her questions. She asked them anyway. "What do we do?" she said. "Be their friends," John said. "Congratulate them and hope for the best." Slowing her breathing and wiping her tears from her cheeks, she forced herself not to cry. She couldn't dispute his wisdom, but the peace she needed wasn't there. "Raise a family," they say. "Follow God," they say. Her eyes glazed over. "Give everything and have your baby die?" They don't tell you that. "Watch your friends accidentally have one instead?" They don't warn you of that. 4 months ago, in spring, on May 23rd. It was sunny, warm. Shelly could smell the beginnings of snow cones, hear the splashing of water in parks, and when she looked out her window and squinted, she saw a cloud in the shape of a puppy. Spring would end soon. Summer would come fast and hot. Church didn't begin until noon, so Shelly had time to sleep in and get ready without missing a single meal. She left her spot next to the living room window and swayed into the kitchen, pressing on the lever of the already filled toaster and continuing on to the bedroom. John lay tangled in the pale yellow bedsheets. While he snored, Shelly danced to the closet. She imagined she was a beginning ballerina, letting her feet collide with the floor each time a snoring sound vibrated out of his nose. It wouldn't be long until she could no longer be as precise. On her way into the shower that morning, she peeked at the mirror and thought of what she might look like when she started showing. She might carry as most women did, in the front, or she might carry like her mom, in the back. For now, at 8 weeks, she could only imagine. The larger her stomach grew, the more limited her movements would become. No more gracious dance moves to keep John from waking. Looking at John's face, halfway squashed against both Shelly's pillow and his pillow, Shelly knew the dance moves were more for her entertainment anyway. John slept as comfortably as a cat hiding in couch cushions. His vulnerability of being woken was in the eyes of the beholder, not the sleeper. "As cute as a cat," Shelly remembered John calling her once. Cats and all other animals seemed more wild than cute to Shelly, but if she thought the statement could apply to anyone, it would apply to John at that moment. Refocusing her attention to the 2/3 of the closet, Shelly sifted through the hanging dresses. No yellow. She would clash with John if he ended up wearing the bedsheets to church. Blue? No. Green? No. Then she saw the white dress and gasped with delight. She hastily moved the tight-fitted dress out of the way, remembering what hung behind it. She pulled out a cherry red dress spotted with tiny, white flowers. It fit tight around her chest, and the empire waist floated over her belly and down to her knees. Even when she did have a bump, she could continue wearing this. The public didn't know about her pregnancy yet. While she would unavoidably show them eventually if she didn't tell them, Shelly wanted more time before people knew, and she would have to make formal announcements to all others in her life, like her mom. Pregnant. It still sparked her excitement whenever she thought about it. Clutching her dress, still on the hanger, Shelly jumped up and down enthusiastically, landing on the balls of her feet. After a few jumps, she felt woozy and foolish. Excited or not, she was pregnant, and the morning sickness had only started to pass. The first trimester was going as well as that time when she was 6 and binged chocolate milk. Cravings didn't come as she hoped they would. She craved less food because without anything in it, her stomach couldn't reject and project its contents. According to her pregnancy book, nutrition was highly important for the health of the baby, so she continued to feed herself despite this. The 7th week had been the worst so far. The queasiness lasted the entirety of her days, and now she had a mixture of gas and cramps. Luckily, on Saturday, she managed to get down a stack of graham crackers, which later led to a bowl of oatmeal, and she had woken up this morning with her healthy appetite restored. The toaster popped in the kitchen, and Shelly nearly peed her pants from surprise. Then again, her hand flew down. No, nothing more than a drizzle. Her stomach grumbled, and she tried to oblige to its commands. Dressing in a long-sleeved white shirt, she pulled her spaghetti-strapped summer dress over her head and onto her body. Before she reached the kitchen, she washed her hands and checked herself in the mirror, making adjustments. Less than a minute had passed, but she raced into the kitchen with desperation. Pop-Tarts tasted best when warm. Grabbing a plastic plate from the cabinet, she reached toward her joy and delight. Her joy burned her hand, so she decided to wait to take out her delight. After 30 seconds, Shelly lost patience and opened up a drawer. Knife, crock pot instructions, rubber bands, more instructions, a toothbrush, tongs. She used the kitchen claws to grab the piece of her final Pop-Tart sticking out from its heat pit. As she did so, she made a mental note to one day explain to her kid not to stick things in toasters. She'd have to avoid setting a negative example. Speaking of which, she should probably eat a more filling and semi-nutritious meal. Eggs were healthy enough, and they cooked quicker than pancakes. Pancakes, she thought. As soon as her brain thought it, her stomach settled in agreement. Shelly would eat pancakes instead of eggs, and nothing could change her mind. It would take time to make them. She looked at the oven clock. John would need to get ready for church soon anyway. Skipping back into the bedroom, Shelly became one with the sheets. John's eyes stayed closed, but consciousness had seeped back into him. Waiting a moment, Shelly watched his patient face. Not a muscle moved, but even so, he looked happy. Hopefully their kid would get that from him. A peaceful resting face. If the baby got Shelly's resting face, it would offend many people in its lifetime. Shelly placed her hand on John's tender chest. It felt soft to the touch, but firm enough that her hand didn't sink into it. Moving her palm in jagged patterns, she gave John a slight shake. His eyes opened and connected with hers. If peace started with the sunrise, John's smile was the sun at its peak. "Hello," Shelly smiled. "Hello, beautiful. Is it time for church?" Shelly scrunched up the left side of her face. "Almost. It's pancake time." John yawned as he spoke. "Wow, pancake time?" "I thought they would be good for breakfast. It's a bit much though, huh? Never mind. It's not pancake time." Shelly worked to unravel from the lemon colors, and when she couldn't see him anymore, John pulled her back toward his body. He whispered into her ear, "Actually, I think it is pancake time." She flipped around and kissed John as fast as her Pop-Tarts had sprung out of the toaster, which she urgently needed to return to and eat. John withheld her no longer, and she scrambled out of the sheets in excitement. This was better than Christmas morning, unless Christmas morning included pancakes, in which case she couldn't imagine anything better. Then she laid eyes on her white icing sprinkled Pop-Tarts. Best to live in the moment, Shelly thought, and she slid onto the table chair. The strudel had slightly cooled, and Shelly sensed it was the best moment to bite into it. Gooey, warm strawberry filling leaked into her mouth. Shelly's body went slack at the taste, and she almost forgot about the pancakes. Then John strutted into the room, amused. The fragrance waved through the air past his nose, and he asked, smirking as if he had already made the failed attempt, "Can I have a bite of that?" His hand reached playfully toward Shelly's plate, and she smacked it. She tried to make the slap as gentle as a goose feather, but instead it came down like a goose beak. "Ow!" John laughed as he shook his hand. "Sorry, wouldn't want my Pop-Tarts to keep you from your breakfast duties." Still amused, John made the step and a half to enter the kitchen. "Very well, Your Highness." Shelly rolled her eyes. "I'm not Your Highness." "Whatever you say, Your Highness." "Oh my goodness, just come get your Pop-Tart and stop calling me that." John returned but ignored the pastry. He brought his lips down to Shelly's hairline, his upper lip barely grazing her auburn hair. "That's okay. You enjoy it, and I'll make pancakes." That was her impressive husband, committed to taking care of her. Imperfect, like everyone, but constantly improving for her sake. Since her pregnancy began, John had increased in attention and self-sacrifice. At times, it became overprotective and obsessive. Generally, though, he found the right balance, and Shelly felt grateful for this. Life was so good, her husband was so great, and their kid would be good too because they would learn life from John. She would try her best to love and teach the kid well, but she worried she may not end up becoming the mother she dreamed of being, the mother she had once dreamed of having. At least she knew without a doubt that John would succeed in being a fantastic father. Shelly coated her 2 pancakes in apricot jam and authentic maple syrup. John coated 2 of his pancakes in peanut butter jelly, and Shelly tried not to retch. Apparently, instead of random cravings, being pregnant had increased the intensity of her likes and dislikes, especially when it came to tarnishing PB with J. As they made the 5-minute drive to church, Shelly stared out the window and answered John's questions. The casual talk allowed her to focus more on the neighborhood than the conversation. Small white flowers hugged the branches of most trees. Earlier in the year, the neighborhood had been lined with standing sticks, flowerless, leafless, and lifeless. Spring's hand had arranged new and known things to bring life back into the streets. Full blooming buds, green grass, and green-leaved trees crowded this area of the desert. Utah certainly defied the odds of nature. John focused less on the scenery and more on the road and his wife. "You seem a lot less sick today." "I feel better. Definitely." "I didn't expect you to bounce back so quickly." "I know," Shelly said happily. "Pregnancy's weird." John stared straight ahead. "It's beautiful." "The trees?" "No, pregnancy. I think it's beautiful on you." Shelly snorted. "You think it's beautiful because you don't have to go through it." "That's not completely true." My body says otherwise. So do my hormones and my soon-to-be stretch marks." "True. I'm sorry," John said. "You know I sympathize pretty heavily, though. It hurts to see you sick or in pain." Shelly sighed. "I know." "But you're right. It's worse for you. That's why it's so amazing to see you do this. You're creating a baby." "I am." Shelly let the ends of her lips raise a little. John was right. It was pretty amazing. And even if it annoyed her sometimes, Shelly needed John's sympathy. It came in use when she had a shoulder to cry on, even if it meant that none of her problems belonged solely to her. She supposed that's how marriage worked. Your problems became our problems. As much as she wanted to stuff away all her issues, she shared most of them with John because that's what spouses did. There were few problems she kept locked away. Their car pulled up to a red brick church building with a steeple. On a concrete sign in front, it said The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The building looked similar to the other churches that one would find on every 5th block in Utah. While walking through the parking lot, John said, "You sure you don't want to tell anyone yet?" "Maybe next week." The two smiled and walked in. Church seemed to end faster than the drive to get there. People talked at the pulpit, they ate the blessed bread and drank the blessed water. People chattered during the lessons and after the lessons, exchanging even louder conversation. As Shelly switched between various talking topics, swishing between crowds of church lingerers, one lady with platinum blonde hair reminded Shelly of her mom. She didn't know how her mom would react when she told her about the pregnancy. Happy or upset? Deborah always told Shelly to wait until her 30s to have kids. Finish her master's first. But Shelly had no intention of getting a master's. She wanted to start her family at the timing that worked for her, not her mom. The leisurely drive back from church allowed Shelly to watch the flowers creep past her window again. John drove 5 miles per hour under the neighborhood speed limit, one of his new protective habits. If Shelly didn't have the pregnancy temporarily under wraps, John would have also plastered a "baby in the car" sticker on the rear window. In his words, "I trust the Corolla, but not Utah drivers." At home, they ate and switched from watching sitcoms to reality television shows like Laugh Out Loud America and Can You Win It All? Shelly munched on chocolate cereal, struggling to keep milk from exploding out of her nose or mouth every time someone made a ditzy fall. Meanwhile, John cringed. By the end of the show, Shelly had endless fits of laughter, and John had a full bowl of untouched, soggy cereal. They settled into bed, feeling content and peaceful. A little past 8 a.m., Shelly woke up. Her lower abdomen hurt. More gas, perhaps. The pain increased to the point where she couldn't identify if her abdomen felt fuller or clenched tight. All she could identify was a searing hot suffering that would not subside. Death seemed near, and then it stopped. Everything went away. Her whines had awoken John, who had his arm on her back and was waiting for a response to his continual questions of, "Are you okay? And what's going on?" "Oh wow," Shelly said. "That was the worst gas pain I have ever felt." John's face did not relax. "It seemed like it. How are you feeling now?" "I think I'm okay. It started again. Except it felt worse somehow. Impossibly so. Compelled by the torment, she pushed herself off the bed. Sitting made it worse. She didn't know why. It just did. Standing, with her arm propped against the bed, helped alleviate the pain by half a degree. She'd take anything. In the background she could hear, "Shelly, Shelly," but she couldn't acknowledge it until the pain passed. If this were an insight into labor, she did not look forward to it. But she needed to get used to it, so she tried to handle the situation with strength. "I'm okay now," she said, gripping the edge of the bed. She winced as she slipped underneath the bed covers. "Do you need to go to the emergency room?" John asked, eyes wide and jaw stapling shut. "I don't think so. It's just gas." Shelly focused on her breath. "I'm going to go to the bathroom." The pain had made time irrelevant, but a half hour had passed and she hadn't taken her early morning pee yet, which was risky even in the first trimester. It astounded her the amounts of liquid she had produced the past few weeks. When she sat on the toilet and looked down, she saw a reddish-brown stain on her bottoms. This was the third day in a row this had happened. She had read about this. Spotting was normal, as long as it wasn't bright red. Nervous still, she reached down and touched it. It rubbed off onto her fingers, fresh. She hurried up and finished, washing her hands and scampering back into the bedroom. Off the nightstand, she grabbed her phone. "Hi, my name is Shelly Lancaster. I noticed some spotting the past few days, and I'm wondering if I can get an early ultrasound to..." She tried to remember the phrasing she had read online. "Verify the heartbeat and location of the baby." The secretary obtained her information and put her on hold. John sat silent, but by the look on his face, she could tell he had questions. The secretary took Shelly off hold. "It looks like we can get you in today. There happens to be an opening this morning at 10. Would that work?" "Yes, thank you." When Shelly put down the phone, John spoke up. "Did they get you an appointment?" Nodding, Shelly said, "I'll be leaving in an hour or so. The appointment's at 10. "Shoot. We have a presentation today at 11, but it's up in Draper. We're talking to some company about our innovation and how it can assist them." "Don't worry about it. This is just a..." She now recalled what the secretary had said. "Viability test. The doctor isn't even there today. You'll be there for the big one, the 12-week one." "No, I'm sure I can work something out. I want to be there." "John." Shelly grabbed his hands. "It's okay. Everything's going to be okay." "Shelly..." "I know your thing is required, and this appointment isn't an emergency. It's just a precaution. Maybe I can take a video for you." His eyes moved to the side. When they returned to her, he submitted to her wishes. "Fine. Text me as soon as you know the results." "I will." Not having the mind to think of anything else, she jumped into a pair of sweats and put on an old t-shirt that said "I Heart NYC." The heart was peeling, but most of the letters had held up. Her mother had bought it for her when they first moved to the city, sizing up in anticipation of her daughter keeping it over the years. And Shelly never had the guts to throw it out. The hour didn't pass fast enough, no matter how many sketches she made. John gave her a kiss on the forehead, cheek, and lips before he left. Eventually she left too, trying not to puke on the drive over. Worst of all, she hadn't felt nausea yet that morning, just anxiety. Would her stomach ever get a break? In the waiting area, Shelly eyed women in their third trimester. That would be her in a few months. Then they called her back. "You'll get to hear the heartbeat of your baby, and we'll send you home with pictures, but no recording in the ultrasound room," the ultrasound technician said. The darkness of the room would give her away if she tried to record a video for John, so she nodded her head. Photos should be enough. He would see the next ultrasound. Shelly inched her sweats down enough for the technician to apply gel to her lower abdomen. The ultrasound appeared on a television screen in front of her. "It looks like you're too early on to see it this way. We'll need to do a transvaginal ultrasound," the technician said. In private, Shelly changed out of her sweats and tucked her garment bottoms into the pocket. It took seconds for her to get into place. As much as she could, she would reduce her waiting time. She wanted to see her baby. The technician came back and inserted a long white stick of sorts. Shelly watched the screen in anticipation, patiently waiting. She tried not to make guesswork about what was a baby and what wasn't. Everything on the ultrasound blended together. The technician would point the baby out when she finished scanning Shelly's insides. Minutes of silence went by. The technician paused on one dark round circle. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm not seeing a pregnancy." Shelly's heart stopped beating. She stopped breathing, stopped thinking. "Okay," she said. "Okay," she said, despite that she had lost an entire future in a few seconds. When the technician finished, a nurse took her to a brightly lit room and evaluated her symptoms, explaining that Shelly had either miscarried, had an ectopic pregnancy, was not as far along as she thought, or had never been pregnant in the first place. "I was pregnant," Shelly said. "My body physically changed. I was pregnant." The nurse refrained from saying anything. Her tired eyes batted. "I'm sorry. We'll test your HCG levels. You'll get your blood work done today, in 2 days, and any time you like next week." I was pregnant, Shelly thought. If the HCG levels are high and rising, it's probably too early to see anything on an ultrasound, or it's an ectopic pregnancy. Maybe it's too early to see, she thought. If they're high and lowering, it's likely you miscarried and already passed the sac. It would be so tiny you wouldn't even notice. Yes, maybe I'm only 3 weeks along, she thought. Okay, Shelly said again. After taking the test and leaving the facility, she texted all the updates to John and added, maybe it's just too early to see the baby. And she kept thinking that throughout the day. When she checked her hospital app later that day, the HCG levels confirmed her pregnancy, and she thought, maybe it's just too early to see the baby. She continued to envision their baby announcement, gender reveal, and the day they would hold their baby together. She continued to feel happy, despite the blood. The bleeding only continued to worsen, enough to prompt her to put on a pad. That night, when she went to the bathroom, she found a clump of bright red blood. It had a form unlike anything she had seen in her periods. Awkwardly, she removed her pad with as much delicacy as she could muster. Then she held what she imagined was her baby and cried. Hearing her, John came to the doorframe and looked down. With his hands on her shoulder, he shed silent tears. Despite the blood, when she went in for her next HCG test, she continued to think maybe it's just too early to see the baby. That same day, she checked the app. The test results were in. Her HCG levels had fallen by hundreds. Later, the nurse called and explained what Shelly already knew. She had miscarried. With that call, her entire future disappeared. She had no idea why. She only knew it hurt, and no matter how long John held her, saying, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, Shelly couldn't stop crying until her sniffles gave way to sleep, and she stopped saying, I'm sorry. End of chapter. I'll read chapter 8 next week, but thanks for tuning in, everyone. I'm sending my love your way.